Welcome everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of Bo Pete Talk. My name is Robert and with me is...
Wida.
Here we go. Today's episode is going to be on you can pick your friends but you can't choose your family.
Yep.
Yeah, we thought we'd look at this. We were talking about this obviously off air. There's no preparation in this particular episode. We're just going to, as they say in the classics, wing it, but I think we're going to wing it, just be heartfelt and share our experiences anecdotally of our life journeys and what we've experienced. Because off air, for both of us, as a lot of us do, at the, what do you call it, the water station, water cooler station?
The cooler.
The water cooler, okay. The
Water.
water cooler, the drinking hole, or wherever it is one during work hours or outside of work hours, choose the fat, as we do from week to week. We will actually discussing venting some of our frustrations. And when we say that, frustrations can be, sadly, sometimes our very own children can disappoint us as they get older. You're not quite experiencing that yet, Peter, but you will as the kids get older. They'll really excite you, make you proud.
No, but while I might not experience that, I definitely know what it feels like to be a disappointment to your parents.
I wasn't going to go that deep and saying my children have been a disappointment.
No,
Absolutely,
no, I'm saying
absolutely,
my
they haven't been.
experience.
They haven't been at all. But there's going to be times when you just you have to watch them fall and fail. I guess that's what it is. Or you might have a differing opinion on a road they should take on their journey, but it's their own journey. So it's not really about that so much. It's maybe we were talking a lot about our parents, and as our parents get older, and sometimes, as we've had in previous conversations, our very own cousins and close ones to the family, where especially when it comes to the wedding, Peter, and you don't want to invite someone, but you're told you have to invite them because they're a member of the family. Did you have that issue, Peter, or were you pretty hardline for the wedding?
For the wedding, I essentially made my kind of wish list of people
Mm,
that I wanted there. That included friends of my parents as well. Obviously I
yeah,
knew them growing up and things like that as
yes,
well. But yeah, so essentially people that I told my parents, like, I picked people who I
picked.
felt
Yeah,
respected our family as a whole.
that's good because we just to share our experience, which is very different to your experience in that I went with the classic list that was influenced by the parents. When I say classic, I was going to be careful what word I use, but I guess the European style wedding where you invite Uncle Bob, I'm making up a name, who you hadn't seen since you were a child, or some compati that you hadn't seen in quite some time, or you know and you really can't stand, but you have to invite because mum and dad really want compati and kamati there at the wedding. And tell you what, when we look at our wedding photos, the wife and I, sometimes we look at these photos and go, now, why were they invited? Why are they there? So the episode's not really about that, but it's more about, obviously, in our lives, we have certain family members that we don't see eye to eye, but they are family. They could be our very own siblings sometimes for some people. I see that a lot as people get older. I've seen that within my own family where brothers and sisters. Now, I'm very lucky. My brother and I, we get along really well. But I've seen brothers and sisters in my obviously extended family here. They won't talk at all. Could be over funeral, could be over the will, could be over money, obviously, I'm implying, or it could be just over differing opinions on lifestyle. But one thing is friends. Friends are a different ball game, and friends are far and few between. Doesn't mean one doesn't have friends, but I think there are friends and then there are friends. There are friends and then there are friends. Friends for life, or friends you meet on your journey of life that you cherish and you enjoy spending time with. There are acquaintances that sometimes get mixed up as being friends. That could be through work or through seeing them occasionally. But there certainly are special friends in our lives, Peter.
Yes, yes. Well, I guess what I find with friendship, it's as you get older, it becomes, I guess, harder and harder to actually make new friends. Not to say that's impossible. I just find, yeah, it's a lot harder, and that's like, I guess, to continue on everything that you're saying in relation to friendships, and I guess how sometimes they can be fleeting as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? I feel that friends are like my receding hairline, in
Yeah,
that as you get older, they thin out because it could be you grow away from certain friends for whatever reason. It could be you're setting up your own family, they're setting up their own family, and you just grow apart. Or it could be you just can't stand each other anymore. I have friends like that where we just grew apart, or it could be a case of whatever reason, just don't see eye to eye anymore. And you are right. There's a natural episode, or it might be a comedy sketch. Certainly, it is by Jerry Seinfeld. He talks about that, about how difficult it is to make friends as you get older, Peter.
yeah, and I guess to add to that as well, I've listened to a few podcasts in relation to this, and part of the reason is as you get older and older, more biases kind of get stacked on to your, I guess, psyche and what you kind of expect from people. It's not the same. So when you're 6 years old, you have nothing in terms of life experiences, biases. So you go out and see someone. It's like, oh, let's be friends. Okay, let's go, and you
Yeah, it
start from
doesn't
there.
take much. Doesn't take much.
Exactly. It doesn't take much, and that's the whole point of that. Like, it doesn't take much. But when now, now you get, say you're looking at towards the, your 60s, it's almost impossible for someone new to break in unless, a lot of your core values are shared. And that's really where those links are made.
It's interesting, as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself of the ease of forming friends and the receptiveness. I think you said that word at one stage, Peter, or I was thinking of that word as you were talking. I can remember one of my friends, and we've grown apart because he's actually moved over to Byron Bay. But from time to time, if we see each other, it wasn't a case of we didn't get along. In fact, I got invited to a few of his birthday parties and milestones along the way. And actually, he was at my 21st birthday party, and I was at his. So we were friends, good friends, and we were friends from primary school. And how did we become friends? Well, it's a classic tale of two red, hot-blooded young boys in year two that I can't remember how it started, but we decided after school we are going to sort our problem out, and we were ready. We had our sleeves rolled up, but there wasn't an audience. It wasn't a classic, fight, 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 fight gathering. It was the bell had gone. We went outside, and he socked it to me, and then I socked it back to him. He cried, I cried, and then we shook hands and we said, "Let's be pals." I know it sounds silly, but one thinks that way when you're in year one, year 2 years of age, 7 or 8 years old, and we became very, very good friends. I can't explain to you why one thinks that way when you're that age, but the ease of forming friendships certainly was so much easier. I feel as you become an adult, in terms of ease of forming friends, that as you become an adult, there's a lot more pressure or barriers, if that's the word to use, if you were someone that really wanted to be receptive to friends, in that friendship groups are already formed, the fear of being judged also, and natural, maybe it might not be paranoid, use that word again, receptiveness of others is not as obvious. The door being open to take friends is kind of maybe left ajar, but it's not wide open as it is when you're in school.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that reiterates even everything that I said earlier. It's definitely the chat. There's more challenge there. I mean, I guess you got to put more effort. I would say into making sure you're more likable. I guess as well. If you want to put it that another way.
Yeah. I think you tend to want to gravitate, or you naturally, psychologically, whether you deliberately go for that approach, but you tend to befriend someone that you can share an interest or conversation with as you become an adult. Friendship groups form, or form that way. If you think about ourselves,
Yeah.
in that, yeah, through work, but also kind of have the same values, or a lot of opinions, and which side of politics we believe or issues, we tend to be always sort of in sync, if you look at it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, I find that yeah, it's very rare that we see things differently. I think that comes back also to our personality types as well, where because I find that even on the things where we might not see eye to eye,
Mm.
um, we both kind of share that, I guess, respect for the other person's opinion, where we can value what they say even though we still don't agree with it.
Yeah, and I think we don't wanting to. We don't, and this is a definition of friendship groups as well, or forming friends, is that you don't have to necessarily always agree, but you come to a point where you actually, the classic saying, agree to disagree. You really live that out. And it's easy to say that, oh, look, we just agreed. Let's just agree to disagree. You don't
Yeah,
have to say it. You just live it out in the
yeah.
way you respond to each other.
Exactly, exactly, and that's I guess the key when it comes to like any friendship, really, or any I should say any relationship, because a friendship is a relationship between two people. So any relationship between people, you got to have that level of I guess respect. Now that extends further to a relationship between husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, father and son, father and daughter, mother and daughter, um, and son and mother and son, and then keep going with your family connections from there.
Yeah, it's so true. Now, an area of this idea of friendship formation and family, and as we said, you can't choose family. We've delved into this before, and it is a pandemic that shouldn't be underestimated. Is loneliness, and there are more and more people that don't have a roof under, they don't live under a roof and are lonely, if you want to put it that way, and live in the streets. Or if they're not, there are a lot of old people that live on their own. And I think there's more and more of that. The idea of community, and which is a part of friends, is distilled a lot more in day to day living. Now, to give an example, migrants is a good example coming to Australia, and thinking of my grandparents, particularly, and possibly this could be the case of your parents, Peter, is that they had a lot of friends that lived nearby. They tended to want to live in suburbs, or if they didn't know people, they formed friendships fairly quickly coming to a new country, and often of the same national background. And I think of my grandparents, they had a lot of friends, and they were friends that shared a similar story of coming to a new found country. Did you have that as well with your parents, Peter?
Yeah, and when I think about, like the stories that my dad told me, I think that one of the main reasons why those communities formed of like, same background communities is mainly because they realized when arriving that they could, because they didn't speak the language so well, so they couldn't connect with the people that were already here. They had to find people who were similar to them in terms of the language they spoke in order to be able to, have some level of like adult communication. So yeah, essentially they couldn't assimilate until they learned more of the more English. Obviously, when once that happened, they assimilated more and it brought in other people. But they originally started with people of the same nationality.
And obviously, they have the same interests and same values. It's very
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
Sometimes we can be critical of migrants coming into a country, and be critical in the sense that you say, "Oh, why are they only associating and not making an effort to mingle, if that's the word to use, with other cultures?" And in part, it is that language barrier, as you pointed out, and it is that comfort being with people of your same faith or value system as well. But and that filters through to interests. I know that I talking about as you get older, difficult to form friends. I did about it would have been a good more than 10 years ago actually. So being in my early 40s possibly, or late 30s of age, I became friends, which might sound unusual to the listeners, to a couple, actually a few old men from swimming. I decided just randomly in my late 30s to take up swimming early in the morning at 5 in the morning to be precise. And in going, I didn't know anyone when I first went there. I found that there were the same people, familiar faces, and you get to know people and they know you by first name. And as I continued to go, day by day, week by week, month by month, and it is an Australian culture thing. The hello becomes how are you, and from the how are you, oh look, we're having a get together after our swim for a coffee, and before you know it, you're in a community. I tend to go for a walk with my dog, and I see some of these old guys still, by the way, and still it's hello, how you been, how so and so. So that's another area, possibly interests and community can be very important in this friendship formation as you get older and finding really good friends.
Yeah, I think any shared common interests is like the driving factor that creates those connections.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. And obviously, the biggest one, and a lot of people will say this, that you obviously form friends, and there are close friends, and there are some, and with friendships come trust, of course. And when I use that word trust, I'm not using it lightly, I'm talking about in the work context. You meet people at work, and some of them you become friends with. And that's why, and actually, I was reading about this, that some people struggle in retirement because they miss that human connection and friends because they're still working and you've retired. That can happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably the hardest thing that I see most people struggle with, especially when they have um, friends who are a little bit younger, where they um, don't have the funding to be able to kind of semi-retire before, like at a similar time. So you're kind of waiting for your mates to catch up.
You're at home and idle hands can be the devil's hands, as they say, because you could be at home and you might have hobbies that might entertain you for a little while, and then you all of a sudden miss that daily routine, showing up at work. Hello, how you going, Bob? Whoever it is, and that familiarity, sharing a bit of frustration you have back at home. And all those little talks sometimes, and friendships,
Talk,
obviously,
yeah.
yeah, that form from that. Now, when we talk about friends, yeah,
So I was just going to add, that's probably could be a reasoning why you have some boomers that are ready for retirement but kind of still coming into work.
yeah, and I know something like that. That you go, why are they still working? And I think we've just possibly found the answer to that. It's interesting, but in saying that, when you talk to a lot of young people are obsessed with this idea of not working till they're old. But I think once you get to, you don't know until you're at that age, if that makes any sense. Because it is a big decision. What we're talking about, the social aspect, if it's non-existent outside of work, can be very difficult to let go of or to leave, so to speak. I want to move to there are friends, and like I said, there are friends, if that makes any sense. But what I mean by that, of course, is I'm saying that there are friends you just go through the motions and friends that you have that trust with. And then there's another level, which is obviously best friends or friends that go on a deeper level than even the word trust. And I'm thinking of, in my case, my wife being my best friend in terms of that and how important that is to have a best friend, if that's the word to use.
Yeah, I think those type of relationships, like you said, it's a little bit further um, than trust, because they're people where they start to kind of see some of your like deep inside feelings that you don't share with anyone else.
Yeah, that is true, isn't it? That's when you know you really have found someone special, when you feel comfortable to share your fears, concerns, things you possibly feel embarrassed about, openly talking about without thinking people are judging you on that.
Yeah,
It is a significant aspect of the way to live. I was thinking as we were doing this about the globally the problem with a lot of people these days, not as we've done, gotten married and having children, and the impact that must have on them eventually as they get older, and whether that is part of the problems we're seeing. I'm thinking of Japan as an example, where loneliness is often talked about, because even if you do a search for it, Japan has grappled for some time with this issue of social isolation. And it seems to be an ongoing trend, particularly with young men.
yeah. Well, one of the interesting points that I kind of think of when it comes to, I guess, what's happening in society now with, especially youth being disengaged with wanting to be productive in the workplace, choosing not to go down the marriage route and relationship route with the opposite sex in order to make a family one day in the future. A part of the issue is if you don't have any skin in the game, you'll never know what it's about. Like, and you never have that drive to, like, I guess, work hard. One of the I was listening to a recruiter talk about, some of the best people to hire for a particular for a role. Doesn't matter which role you're hiring for, but there was two options that kind of made the most, I guess, productive employees. One is a person who has debts. They become a productive employee because obviously they need to pay down their debts. And the second one was fathers who have children. They're the they said they're the two most productive types of people when it comes to the workplace when you're hiring.
Wow, I
Yep.
didn't think it would be like that. So
Well,
the data's
see,
supporting that.
well, it's not the data. It's their experience with the, I guess, in hiring, firing. Like, again, this is secondhand knowledge now because I'm speaking about someone else that I don't know personally
Okay.
myself. But you know, when you sit back and think about it, like, there is the logic is sound when it comes to that, because a person with debts needs to pay their debts. So that means that
Motivated.
they need the job in order to pay their debts. And secondly, a father with children, right? Traditionally, they like they either might not have the kids themselves, because they might be with the mother, or generally they have more time to be able to work overtime to be able to provide more for the kids as well. So that's the reason why the father of children is another productive employee.
So what happens as people get older, you think then, and they're no longer a debt, possibly, and they don't have children, the children have flown a coop. Do you think they become less motivated to work?
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't say the necessarily the motivation, because there's always a motivation to go to work. I would say the drive diminishes, or the hunger.
Okay, but obviously this is anecdotally you're saying that, possibly, or you'd have to look
Yeah,
into it deeper.
yeah. Well, look, it really comes back to individuals. Like, I can talk to people and ask them, at different stages of their career, how you feel. I won't know what's true because I can't read minds. All right, and this is the, I guess, the issue that you face when it comes to this. It's always it's a qualitative type of experiment. You can't actually record anything because it's a matter of feeling for people, and people can lie, people can misrepresent how they're feeling, and people can, yeah, and that throws out the statistics for that. So there is no statistics for that, really.
We have AI, so you know what the AI says? I'm just putting it in and I just got a pop up just as I hit it in Google Gemini. Are older people more reliable than younger people? Perceptions is one of the subheadings. Let's go to the conclusive findings. It talks about legal and ethical consideration. I wasn't asking for that. I just asked a straightforward question. Google Gemini. Employees
Yeah, but
often say, oh, sorry, go. What were
no,
you
I was
going to
going to say,
say?
I find it'll be hard for it to be able to actually provide an answer, because you can't really study that besides what is anecdotal.
Well, there's some headings here pointed out about perceptions with older workers, experienced and skilled, of course, strong work ethic, lower turnover, because older workers tend to have longer job tenures and higher job satisfaction. Perceptions of young people, adaptability and agility, fresh perspective, enthusiasm and energy. Okay, it's playing both sides, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it won't ever not favor one. And also, when you look at how that even presented it, right? It's only more recently where you know tenure became an issue in, I guess, candidates, because these days it's more efficient when you're climbing your career to switch quickly than it is to stay in one place. So the workplace environment has changed, and that's not a candidate issue. That's just how the working environment has changed into.
Well, according to AI, and AI never lies,
Yeah,
it says here on productivity and performance, no clear overall difference. About 41% of studies showed no difference, while the remaining findings were split between which age group was more productive. How about that?
but let me ask you a question. Given that everything's the same, so two people, one person is 30 and the other person is 50. So these are people that are not at the start of their careers and not at the end of their careers, right? On either ends, but they're still, there's a 20-year gap between these two people, right? So they're not. You can't say one's immature. You can't say the other one's too old. But there is 20 years, and in 20 years, that one person's cleared their debts and the other person, is probably amassed the biggest debt that they can. This is now statistically speaking. Who do you think is going to work extra hours? If the need comes up for working overtime out of the two, who would you say that there were tasks that were unfavorable will jump to impress, and look for, I guess, the promotion over both people? Who would work unpaid extra hours out of the two? If you take that now, don't look at it anecdotally. Look at it based on your experiences with other
Mm,
people. So you can't base it on yourself, right? Because on yourself, you say, "Yeah, I'm the best. I'll do
yeah,
everything." But
yeah.
that's you. Look at it how you see other people, in that circumstance.
I like the hybrid, if that's the word to use, where I don't think it's smart to employ if you because you're playing you're working on odds, yeah, because this will never ever be clearly defined for everyone. Yeah, you're only going based on your own experiences and observations, and as well the data, as it says, you could vary from one person to the next. But overall, from my experiences, I have found that uh, I don't like too young. It's nice having young people because they're enthusiastic, but I find that they can be less reliable because they're at that age where they're free to do a lot more. And if they have a big Sunday, they're not going to rock up on Monday, possibly. Whilst older, and if they're too old, I find that, and that sounds very disrespectful. So I do apologise putting it that way, but I'm calling it as it is. When one gets to that magical 65, 67 in Australia, I guess, age, that they're counting the days possibly. And they could be carrying a lot of baggage in terms of negative experiences in the workplace. I find that happy medium is where you get that experienced person who's still young enough to be enthusiastic and wants to impress the manager, um, is who I would go for if I was HR. Because interestingly, from the data from particularly one Australian study, this is what AI says. It's not my looking at Australian studies. Found that 64% of HR professionals viewed older workers as more reliable, and 74% saw them as more loyal. And I concur with that in my experiences with older. But as I said, the downside of the older, in my opinion, is that they could be stumbling to that finish line. So I'd prefer that experience, if that makes sense, and that they've gone through some sort of university of life and they're at that point, and especially if they have a young family, they tend to want, that's a good motivator in many ways and can make them more level headed. And I want,
So,
yeah.
based on what you said, it's very in line with. Look, I said a father with children, but like the way that you said it really is anyone with a young family.
Got to be careful of that because if people don't have families, it sounds like I'm discriminating. Obviously, we're not employing people here right now, and you don't employ people that way. I do need to put that disclaimer statement out there. Of course, you employ people based on equity, and that involves our job criteria, of course, but you can't. And people can talk as much as they want that they don't, but what your brain is conjuring up, whether it be subconsciously or when you're staring in front of the mirror what you think or perceive. If you were putting money on it, who would you put the money on to be a successful employment that you, if you had to choose?
Well, yeah, obviously there's more to it than just that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always first the organization comes first that you're hiring for if you're in that position.
But there are laws as well you have to follow.
Exactly,
You
exactly.
can't just employ people based on that. There has to be a fair approach. In saying that, but it's a very interesting area, isn't it? Because they always say, better the devil you know. And when you're trying to employ, many years ago, people did employ based on a lot more on word of mouth, I would argue, and would use that as a reliable source of employing people. So you have, because if you're employing, and this is the disadvantage of the way it's done via huge approaches in workplaces. Yeah, it's all fine and dandy following paperwork and protocols and processes, if that's the word to use, but it can become what it's trying not to do, but it becomes inhuman. And the human element is that when you employ someone based on recommendation or networking or whatever it be, you know what you're getting. You don't have to play this hocus pocus mystical game of trying to get applicants to go through certain hoops or tick certain boxes when you're asking them questions, because the truth be it, you really never really know how they're going to get along with other people in the workplace, which could be the biggest Achilles heel in all of it.
Yeah, that's it. And that's I guess is the hardest part is trying to find the right personality. I think that's the best way to sum it is for I guess the area that they're going to be working in.
Yeah, I know from people I've spoken to that have spoken about organisations they worked with these nice, highly sophisticated HR and procedures and processes that they use, where they do psych tests and all the rest. They still end up with absolute, excuse my colloquialism here, Looney Tunes that they end up employing that cause a lot of trouble and havoc in the workplace. And you think, well, what happened there to that magical HR approach?
Yeah, but see, when it comes to those psych tests, you can very much fake your responses.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So true.
Because you know what's interesting about those? I've taken a few in my time. They tend to be multiple choice, and the
Yes.
choices that they give you, if you choose the most passive kind of approach while still defending, I guess, your rights as an individual, they tend to be the most favorable answers. So you can read it, and you can be an extremely aggressive person, for argument's sake. Read the answers and choose the most passive responses that's still defending yourself though, and you'll be viewed as completely different to what your actual personality type is.
Yeah, that's right. And people bluff it and wing it
Yeah,
and they're dishonest. I know they try to catch people out by asking a lot of questions and eventually they give differing answers and all the rest of it. But I think they're underestimate. Sometimes your classics sociopath would be very good at that game of outwitting the psych test, so to speak.
yeah. Well, like they say that there's no wrong answer in all that, but I think it's to weed out like what type of, like I said, what type of personality you are. So that way, say for example, if you're going for a sales job, right, and you tend to be more aggressive, that might be beneficial in making the sale. And then it's like, okay, how well does this person really need to work in a team if he's calling, you know if he's doing outbound calls, or she's doing outbound calls. Um, well, that might you might not really need that much teamwork, so we can actually pick someone who's a little bit more aggressive, and that might be beneficial for us. Um, but if you're working in a team environment where collaboration and
Mm.
a close knit team is needed, you need people who willing to sacrifice and work as a team or within the team and be a team player in order to be able to achieve goals. You can't have people going off on their own in those circumstances.
It's a really hard one. Okay, it's quite a deep area, isn't it? HR and how
Yeah.
that works and how it operates. Because obviously we always are wary of the legal requirements when it comes to these recruitments of individuals for the workplace. It's not easy. It is related to friends and what we're talking about, because it's funny as creatures of needing that social interaction that when we go back to that word of picking friends, as we're getting older, we tend to pick friends. It's almost like a dog where we have to sniff a fair bit before we let someone in. And a lot of times it becomes that as we become adults, as we touched on before, is that you're sharing similar interests, passions, values, acceptance of certain viewpoints. And whether that be leaning on the left of politics or on the right of politics or you're centred or whatever it be. But certainly I would argue people that are lean towards the left will associate more than likely with people that lean towards the left, and likewise those that are the right would tend to hang around. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but I think it's more lucrative and attractive in that way. And unfortunately, that game of life doesn't reflect or become apparent in the workplace recruitment game, if we want to call it. It's a very different game. But in saying that, a lot of professional white collar jobs do still hang on networking and even dinners that occur to size up and work out that social collaborative what's the word I'm after, that ability to work with other people professionally.
Asian.
Yeah, cohesion, yeah. That's a good word, cohesion in the workplace. It can wreak havoc otherwise. So it's interesting. It's interesting some of the great, amazing innovators of the 20th, early 21st century. Some of them are alive today and some of them have passed away. Let's look at Steve Jobs. Now, reading a lot about his lifestyle, now I'm relying on what biographies have been put out there, but they tend to paint a picture of someone that was extremely driven, but was very polarizing of workers and demanding. And I hear that same aspect when it comes to Elon Musk as a boss or a manager. And that leads me to another area, Peter, of interest. Can managers in high positions have friends in the workplace?
They definitely can.
It's interesting because I have heard it said where they say it's lonely up the top.
No, you got to have friends that are in at the top. So if depending on where your level is in an organization, that kind of dictates where your friendships can kind of come from.
It's funny that a lot of workplaces, when a high CEO comes in, they will recruit and employ people that they've worked with in the past. And one of the areas that they do gravitate towards is in that space of HR and getting a HR person. Almost like they need to get that. I hate to use that expression because HR is way more than that. A henchman, the
Yeah.
person that's going to have those tough conversations or help in those top conversation, because you can lose credibility easily as a CEO or a head honcho in your workplace if you appear to be losing control because you become fearful of the ramifications when you're holding someone accountable. And obviously, if you have HR behind you or the gumption to use the law on your side, that conversation can be very different and also work in your favour.
Yeah, it's I find especially HR kind of serves as kind of like a buffer as well, kind of I guess helps with one to protect the organization, but two to also allow like a medium for the organization and employees to kind of sort out if there's any grievances.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. Human beings are social creatures.
Are
And we're
you?
just as aggressive as those chimpanzees in the African jungle that will beat up another, what do we call them, a group of monkeys? What's the collective noun for, or a tribe or a community of monkeys? What do we call those? The chimps in terms of that.
A throng?
Is it? Yeah, I think it
Is it?
is.
Is it?
The
Is it a
collective
throng?
noun. Yeah, the collective noun. I think it's something that sounds unusual. A troop, a whoop of chimpanzees.
It could be a troop, yeah.
A troop of. Well, I guess we're talking about in terms of a community. Obviously, you have the alpha male in the group, and then you have obviously the young babies, offspring, and whatnot in that little family group, and they'll do whatever it takes, don't they? And it could mean death.
Yeah, yeah.
And that translates to how we are as human beings in terms of, it's funny, isn't it? We go in a workplace and certain things, if you look at it not so long ago in human history, we would have clubbed someone without thinking. We would have, yeah, used physical violence to sort out that issue. Times and decorum have changed over human history. And we live in a very, very strange, peculiar time if you compare it to the way humans interacted in its short time on the globe. Now, when we think of that, we could think, yeah, but there was organized social interaction if you look at the ancient Egyptians, but humans have been on the globe way longer than that, haven't they, Peter?
Well, yeah. If you look at, I guess, the scientific evidence put forward by, um, uh, I don't know what is it paleontologists or they're the ones that look. Well, anyways, one of the scientists that look into, I guess, human history. Um, there's at least a quarter of a million years for modern humans.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you talked about the Aborigines, they've been dated all the way back to, what do you call it?
What was it, 65,000?
I've got here 65,000 years.
Yeah.
In Arnhem Land, Northern Territory, have provided artefacts including stone tools and a variety of other sources to suggest from dating 65,000 years. And why I mention that is because indigenous cultures, up until yesterday, we're talking about 1788 for Australia, they did live that type of close-knit community, family-orientated groups, and if they needed to sort out an issue, they would sort it out with the spear or whatever it was, weapon, whatever they would have used at the time.
Yeah, but even if you look at our modern society, there is still that threat of violence, always in the background.
We have laws and rules, and we call ourselves civilized, don't we?
Yeah, but you got to think. Hang on. You got to think though. What happens when you break those rules?
There are laws
Yeah.
in
Well, what
place.
happens if you break those laws?
You go to jail,
Right. But you refuse to go to jail. What happens then?
lock you up.
Well, you're thrown in jail
Yeah,
by who? By the police. Right.
yeah.
So there's that physical violence that takes
Oh,
place
okay.
regardless. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, but but you don't have that. The script is written for you. You're not going to win in a case like that, are you?
Yeah. I guess
Yeah,
probably not violence. Violence is probably the wrong
yeah,
wording there. Maybe force.
yeah.
It's force that is driving our, I guess, civilized, and I put that in quotes, our civilized society.
But there are a lot of communities, gangs. I'm getting tired of gangs and whatnot. That it was still resort to that old way of sorting out issues. Interesting in Melbourne in terms of news at the moment. What is it? They've got these bins around the place for machetes. Have you heard about that?
No,
To return your machetes or your look. Come on, look it up as we're speaking right now. All right, I'll read it for you. Melbourne machetes. Come on, what have they done?
I'm just gonna do a search for machete
Hey,
bins.
it's hit the news.
Yeah, machete bins rolled out in Wyndham.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Solve the problem. They're big thinkers, aren't they? Solve the problem. They're gonna have 40 machete disposal bins in statewide because that's the biggest issue. Because people are just going around with machetes and cutting people's arms off everywhere in Victoria. Is that right? So I should now I can visit Victoria because they've got these bins because people are going to put them in the
Well, but
disposal
what's gonna
bins.
happen when we need machetes to cut down bananas?
What in Victoria? Oh, one uses a machete often. I was using one the other day to cut a few. But and then you have in America there where that's the one thing about America I don't get, Peter, is their gun laws. And it's funny if you're American, they don't get our laws where we don't allow the right to bear arms.
I think it's one of those because you're used to one way.
It is. It has to be.
Yeah.
Because obviously no one's been shot or ploughed down in mass shootings in schools in America, so it really isn't an issue at all, is it, Peter? Gun violence
Yeah.
isn't an issue in America at all.
I always said that the US's biggest problem when it comes to their gun laws is how available weapons are to unstable people.
No, and that's it. That's the problem. You just said it. They'll take that first bit you said out, and I've seen it on both sides of the bar politics aisle, where they will take out that idea of access to weapons and center around. There's just a lot more children with mental health problems. I've even seen it where they've gone for the fact that let's look who they are. They must be Middle Eastern. They must be members of the LGBTQ plus. Start pinning it on a group
Yeah.
to explain away the fact that the accessibility to guns is really, truly must be anecdotally if you compare Australia versus America. And Americans must hear this, that to Port Arthur, and I don't want to jinx us, of course, but we had the odd mass shooting or whatever it is come up. That's pretty much died down in Australia, hasn't it? To zero. Mass
Yeah.
shootings, that is. Mass shootings.
Yep. Yep. Well, I haven't heard of a mass shooting since Port.
Let's touch wood on that, of course, but even if there was to be one, they're very far, let's hope not, of course, but they're far and few between, of course, as opposed to what goes on in America, and that's something that's worthwhile. But I've heard the argument, I have certainly heard the argument on whether it be CNN or Fox or whatever it be over there. So on both sides of the political aisle, where they'll turn around and say, but down under, they have machetes or whatever you want to call it, and it's a massive problem. So they haven't solved the problem. They've still got a lot of crime from machetes, and that's not true. That's not necessarily true. And a lot of them, they have the what is it? NHR over there. What is it? The gun lobby over,
Yeah.
and they contribute a lot of money. The NRA, it is.
NRA. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
contribute a lot of money in America, and that's underestimated as being a major problem over there.
Well, look, like I said, it's just it's a different climate. The way that I guess even in terms of as countries, the way that we formed are completely different. Our histories are completely different. And I wouldn't say that there's that anyone's better than anyone in terms of the way that we live our lives. It just is what it is. Like.
It is, you're right.
Yeah, like who am I to change what people do in a different country living over here? If I lived in the United States, I might push for change in some way. But I can make the comment. Oh yeah, I think it's too available the weapons there, and that's where my comment ends. I've got nothing more to say. Should they?
I
Should
think
they?
we, I think we can still have the opinion on it, given that there's tragic human life associated with it. If we were asked an opinion, we should give an opinion.
Look, if someone wanted to know, yeah, sure, you can always give your opinions. Like I never see that as a problem. But we're just coming from different. Like we come from different places.
Yeah.
So for like I said, I'm used to growing up in a country where guns are extremely restricted away from
Mm.
people.
And it's not in our Bill of Rights, so is that right as
That's
well? Yeah,
correct.
yeah, it's a valid point.
Yeah,
And we're too busy trying to fight off the kangaroos.
that's right. And emus.
Yeah, that's just for our Americans friends or people overseas. No, kangaroos do not come to school with the children. They don't ride them. There aren't that many out there. There are actually there are a lot of kangaroos in Australia, but they're not down the road where people live. That is nice that we the way you reined it in there because it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, about context? And it's quite interesting actually. You brought that up because over the weekend there was the big march on Sydney Harbour Bridge, and it was, I guess, an opportunity for solidarity in terms of the violence towards human loss being lost in the Gaza and then into the war over there. And I must say, and it gets lost in translation, I've read a lot on it in the media, and it's reported beautifully when they talk about it in the context of people really standing up and saying we want to see an end to the death of the loss of life. Full stop. But you did have a small minority that had silly stuff like I noticed there was a picture, and I hope it wasn't AI generated, but it seemed to be in a lot of reports. Did you see the picture of the Iran leader? Someone was carrying that poster, and that's just stupid. That's ignorance and stupidity. That, but you're always going to get that. I mean, if the reports are correct, there were 300,000 people, and you had a few silly people. There was even talk someone brought, and that's when we got an issue if it's true. And again, I don't know if it's true, but they were saying that there was a Taliban flag being waved. Again, that's just stupid because you really don't know much about the Taliban. I don't know much. I know a little bit about the Taliban, But that's a really ignorant thing to do, and it's getting away from the point of what people were trying to accomplish in the march. But the reason why I bring it up is not about that. It's actually to bring it up in the context of what we just talked about, in that we can certainly talk about human life, but I don't think we can really go beyond that. I know a lot of people want to judge both one side over the other. That seems to be the way to go about it. If we go down the line of human life, full stop, that should be enough. But then it can become marginalised and racist conversations, whether it be pro-Israel or anti-Israel. So either way, and it goes back to what you said. That's why I'm bringing it up. We've got to be very careful how opinionated we are on what's going on in other countries or in other places in the world.
Yeah, this is kind of why I don't like taking a stand when it
Mm.
comes to matters that I can never directly influence. Like, look, I can have my opinion with my close and trusted friends, where I know that conversation stays within the realm of the room where we discussed it. The reality is, like, say, even like on a platform that we're on now, it's not my place to say anything
Because it could be influential. Could be influential in a bad or a positive
in a bad way.
or a
Exactly.
negative way, and
Yeah,
you
and
just don't
even
know.
it's even not my place to even go on like on protest for that even. So if I was to come on and say, oh yeah, I went to the protest and
Mm.
and it was such a great a great experience or a bad experience, doesn't matter which way. It's not my place to say. It like I said, it's not our conflict. If if we wanted to make a difference, there are other ways that you can truly make a difference. Like a protest doesn't make a difference. It does show solidarity, but
Yeah.
it's not my place. Like I said, it's not my place to make those types of opinions known. And if I did go, it would have been like I guess a private thing that I'd keep to myself.
Yeah, it's a hard one because it's a very dangerous place when you start getting up and wanting to protest on certain issues, because there's always that issue of, yeah, you're protesting or complaining about that matter, but there are so many other parts of the world where there are just as bad, sadly, issues going on. There are parts of the world right now as we speak where there is tragic loss of life, and children as well. I do think it is important, but the only aspect of it that I did, the theme, or when those words were used, is I never like to see children losing life
Yeah,
in any part of the world. That's what happens whenever you have conflict, of course. To put context for everyone, there were a lot of lives lost on both sides in the Second World War. The British took a lot of lives in order to accomplish what we in the West consider important in saving the West from Germany at the time. I'm not trying to say that they shouldn't have done that, by the way. I do not want to be misrepresented in saying that, but there were lives lost. That's a fact of war. And that's what's going on at the moment in that part of the world that we do want to protest about. That we have to be careful to not move away from the fact that the only opinion we can really be passionate, I feel, about it is the loss of human life.
yes,
If you want to go deeper and go into, how much land one should have and what the border should look like and who should be in government from either side or whatever, I don't think we're qualified enough to comment that deep. And there are big issues in Australia to consider as well in our own backyard.
oh yeah. If you yeah, exactly. I think our own backyard needs a bit of a mow before we start looking at other people's
And
yards.
judging other people. I think it's good that we are concerned about other people, but not lose the focus on the cost of living, the number of homeless people in Australia, the unsolved mystery, and it is a mystery, I believe, because we don't seem to be able to solve the plight of Indigenous people in Australia. Would you agree, Peter?
Yeah, exactly.
That's massive. I don't see any government come up with a true solution in that space.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we had a referendum, and unfortunately, people did not, whether you agree with yes or no, but it was overwhelming. People were not satisfied that that was going to be the final solution to the problem. Because if people did think, and you can take it and sugarcoat it as much as you want, people can say that's such a tragedy because they would have made it so much better for Indigenous people. I can partly understand that rhetoric, but I can't totally understand it because there is that skeptical side of me that thinks, I don't know if that's going to solve the problem, the real deep, meaningful problem. It's a hole that we've dug, and I don't know how we can get out of, which is the displacement, stolen generations, as we know in our history. I don't think it, and we could have a whole episode on this, and I don't want to, unless I actually have Indigenous people on the show to tell us what they think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, see, for me, I would love to be able to have someone who is passionate about reconciliation
Yes.
from like that's indigenous that can actually say, what would make what would close the issue on there for them, and in terms of what's happened in the past.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be really great. Maybe that's a challenge for us, isn't it, to get someone of
Yeah.
Indigenous that's actually got their hands dirty in some of those remote communities as well. That would be really
Yeah.
interesting. Whether we talk about, when I say I'm thinking about, it seems to have lost gumption in terms of being in the headlines, but there were certainly problems in Alice Springs, as we know, in Australia, and I would love to talk to someone, and preferably of Indigenous background, that does. And there are some amazing people out there with Indigenous background that I've met in my time that are trying to make a difference in that space, and just to hear their perception and
Yeah,
possible
exactly.
solutions, or maybe they might come with the same conclusion. There is no true solution, and it may be a classic way of saying it's going to take time, and time, fortunately, is something we will not have on our side if we talk about it being over many, many generations
Yeah, agreed.
on in the world. My name is Robert, and with me is
Peter.